Hello everyone, this is Erik, the Asian movie enthusiast, and this is my review of Drug War, a crime thriller from 2012 that was a Chinese-Hong Kong co-production directed by Johnny To. Now I mentioned this director a bunch of times in my DVD collection playlist because I do have a handful of his films in my personal collection, but I do not think that I've discussed any of his films in a separate review on this YouTube channel yet, so that will change in 2019 because one of my goals this year is to cover more of Johnny To's movies, with a focus on some of his more impressive titles, and I think Drug War is one of the highlights of his career, in my opinion. Now, the opening scene in this movie is a drug bust involving a busload of passengers who have consumed pouches of powdered material to smuggle across the border. Now, after the bust, a cop is monitoring some of the criminals in the hospital when Louis Koo's character shows up after getting into a car accident. Now, after it's discovered that he has traces of drugs on him, he agrees to assist the police in an undercover operation that is intended to take down some big-time criminals. Now, like some of To's better films, there is a lot of content in Drug War that is communicated through visuals, character mannerisms, and character actions instead of dialogue. In general, this director is not a fan of having his characters explain every little thing to the viewer through scenes of exposition. And that's one of the reasons why I'm such a big fan of this guy. When you carve out, expository dialogue, I think a movie flows much more naturally. Because in real life, people do not always sit down with us and explain their life philosophies and personality traits, right? So when this kind of thing happens in a movie, it usually feels artificial. Now, Johnny To tends to avoid this pitfall. So when a director uses this strategy, however, to avoid, verbal exposition, the viewer is forced to pay attention to the details so they can fill in the blanks themselves. Now, one example of this is Louis Koo's character in Drug War. His dialogue is fairly limited in the film. He doesn't talk much. And it's difficult to tell if he's setting up the cops to betray them, or if he's truly willing to betray his drug associates in order to gain a lesser punishment by the government. There are times where Louis Koo's character will make a mistake, but did he intend to make that mistake, or was it an actual mistake? You know what I mean? Does he have an ulterior motive somewhere? One of my favorite scenes in the entire film involves the Chinese tradition to burn fake money as an offering to the dead. But Drug War uses that tradition in a way that I've never really seen done before in a movie. And it really makes you question the sincerity of Louis Koo's character in this film. It's just a fantastic scene. I love it. By the end of the film, he never sits down with anybody in the film and explains his plan or why he's doing what he's doing, but the viewer will definitely understand his intentions. At least I think I did. There are a few little surprises down the stretch as well, specifically related to his actions, which I really enjoyed. And one of the reasons why I enjoyed it is because his intentions were communicated naturally and intelligently without the need for any awkward speeches. So many great scenes in this film are littered throughout. They have to deal with this indirect communication that To likes to use a lot. It's really good. One big benefit of having such really good situational script writing is that the movie is constantly engaging, regardless of whether or not there's any action. We basically did get two big shootouts in the film, which are very good, by the way, and that's all that we need, because the rest of the film is just riveting character interaction. You know what I mean? Undercover operations and stuff. The script writing in this movie is so tight, it's difficult to think of scenes that could have been edited out. There's virtually no fat or dead weight in this film at all. And that's a big positive for me personally. I remember reading a review actually on IMDb years ago. I don't think it was of this film. It was another film. I don't remember which one exactly. But the reviewer said that, they explained how they rated movies. And I found it an interesting, strategy. They say, okay, every movie that they watch starts out as a perfect rating, a 10 out of 10 rating, all right? And then, however, they take off a point every time they look at their watch while they're watching the movie. Now, I don't think they were being literal with that, but basically what they were saying is the perfect movie to them is a movie that engages them every minute of the runtime, regardless of whether or not it has flaws or whatnot. And that doesn't happen quite that often. You know what I mean? I always found that an interesting way to look at movies, and that's kind of the way I look at it. So Drug War gives me that sense of satisfaction. And, I never look at my watch when I'm watching this movie. I'll tell you that much. One regional thing to keep in mind is that China does implement the death penalty for certain drug trafficking crimes, which is not something we do in the United States, really. So as an American viewer, I can kind of appreciate the stakes at play in this film. These drug dealers are not just trying to avoid drug time. They're trying to avoid a death sentence if the cops catch them. And that adds a certain intensity to events and justifies the ruthlessness of some of these people. There's no graphic violence in this film at all, really, but there are quite a few point-blank gunshots that look pretty painful. The filmmakers use a lot of practical effects like squibs, and they supplement that with really good sound design that makes the gunshots more intense, and it works. Performances are top-notch. Louis Koo is mostly stoic in this, but he also has some great scenes of emotion and desperation that I really enjoyed. I think he's very good in this. Sun Hong Lei and Huang Yi are equally great as the lead detectives who are managing the team of cops. They have a certain intensity in their eyes that's quite striking, and I like that. In terms of negatives, there are none. I love everything about this movie. Everything. Drug War comes with my highest recommendation. It's an example of John Ito just kind of firing on all cylinders, and it's currently available on Region 3 and Region 1 DVD with subtitles, so check this out. And yes, I recently got a chance to watch the Korean remake of Drug War, entitled Believer, so look out for my review of that film in the next few days. And as always, I'll see you next time.